Well, Bill, the price of employee health care is going up, and in many cases, the quality is going down. Nearly 3/4 of all American workers are in managed health care plans, but many of these plans fall short of employee needs. A new survey shows that many small business owners don't have the time or the resources to scrutinize all the various HMO plans, and consequently, they often choose a health care plan based on cheaper cost rather than on its performance. Here to tell us more is David Friend, a healthcare consultant at Watson Wyatt, the firm that conducted the study. David, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Explain quickly what the main conclusion of this study was.
Well, the main conclusion is that we believe there's a paradigm shift going on in the country. And pretty much we believe that the large employers are leading the way and starting to focus less on cost and more on value received for their plans.
Well, given the large component that healthcare is in the cost of doing business, it doesn't seem too surprising that small businesses would try to cut back as much as possible on this cost. Is that what's going on?
Sure. I think there's been a temptation because it's very difficult to determine value in this marketplace. It's very difficult for employers to determine what is really quality. So there's been a tendency to go for the lower price. And you've seen in many markets the cost of healthcare actually dropping. The managed care plans, as a result, have been reducing their payments to the hospitals and their physicians. And there's a belief now that we may be approaching a danger point, that we may be cutting costs so much that we're potentially compromising quality. Therefore, what we're trying to get our employers to think about, the buyers, is to say, instead of just looking at cost alone, think about the value received. Instead of just focusing on the clerical services, think about the clinical. And instead of focusing on the inputs, what's coming into the system, and trying to ration those, think about what you're getting. Think about the outcome.
How difficult, though, is it for your average small business owner to buy health care, and how efficiently can they purchase health care for their employees?
I think right now it's very difficult for them, because there's really very few objective standards. There's no kind of a J.D. Power or some kind of a shorthand that allows employers to evaluate the quality of plans. The Washington Business Group on Health, who we co-sponsored the survey with, has developed a concept called HEDIS, which they are in the process of refining, which is in essence a shorthand to attempt buyers to be able to somehow measure in some objective way the quality of the care that they're receiving.
And small businesses, I assume, also don't have the same clout or buying power that a big firm would have either.
Sure, and in fact in our survey what we found is while 80% of the large employers were starting to use HEDIS and exert their clout, only about 10% of the small employers. But we think they're going to move along. We also think that the big employers are paving the way, and that by making the providers provide a higher quality of service, that the small people will benefit from that.
Another question, not just in terms of quality, but overall coverage. We know that there's some 30-odd million Americans that don't have health care. Most of them are employed, but they're employed by small businesses. What's happening with coverage for those people?
Well, our sense is that the number of people without coverage may increase. Depending on what the federal government does, depending on what happens with Medicare. There's a lot of cost shifting going on right now in the system, as you're aware. And our concern is that if the federal government tries to shift back costs to employers through changes in Medicare, Medicaid, that in fact more employers may in fact drop coverage. So it's conceivable that in fact more people may lose their coverage over time as a result of cost shifting. Because if the government shifts costs to employers, one of the ways that they can defend themselves from that shift is in essence to in fact drop coverage. So we think it's a potential problem.
Any recourse an employee has to get better coverage if they're lucky enough to have it?
Clearly, a lot of employees can vote with their feet. We believe that over time, if labor markets do tighten, employers are going to want to attract and retain good people. Cost of turnover is very high. So hopefully, employees will have a choice of who they work for, and potentially the benefit may be one of the drivers for their employment.
All right, thanks, David. Interesting study.
Thank you very much.
We've been speaking with David Friend of Watson Wyatt.